All right. So we got author Bob Wilson in today's podcast, who recently wrote the Protestant Guidebook. How you doing, Bob?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on, Mark.
Yeah. So just for the audience here, just looking at the table of contents, some of the things you cover are you talk about the Reformation, but then what happened after that, you talk about the Jesuits. And that's a topic I want to kind of focus on today a little bit if we can, because we hear about the Jesuits, but a lot of us don't really know too much about them and what they're really doing and why they started this kind of stuff. Who are they? And by the way, before I forget, Mr. Fauci happens to be a Jesuit as well, which he just
Well,
recently
go
talked about.
figure.
Yeah, he just talked about that like last week in an interview. And then one of the things you talk about is the infiltration of science and heliocentrism, which
Right.
kind of surprised me because you don't see too many Christians talking about this topic with an open mind. So
Yeah, well,
I
that's
was,
because
yeah.
all of the major churches have basically gone with the heliocentric model. They don't even question it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because about 100 years ago or so, the evolution, the Darwinism topic, some people went with that and some did not. And even
Mhm.
today, you get kind of a mixed bag, I guess. But a lot of Christians will question evolution, no problem.
Yeah, and the interesting
You know,
thing is that the evolution argument would not even be possible without first setting out the framework provided by the heliocentric model. And
yes,
so the whole thing is a sequence that started
yeah,
500 years ago. And what I do in my book is I start out talking about how the heliocentric model was essentially revived from, some ancient religions about, people who worshiped sun gods and held that the sun was the center of the universe as opposed to the earth. And then it went from there, starting with Copernicus. He was the first one who sort of revitalized the theory in the Middle Ages. And then after that, you had a bunch of other scientists who came on board, like Kepler, who had ties to the Jesuits, and then later Galileo, and then Newton, who most people don't know was actually a Freemason.
yeah.
And another thing I mention in the book is that the Freemasons work together with the Jesuits to promote whatever theories they find beneficial for their cause.
Mhm.
So the whole thing started with heliocentrism. And basically, the Jesuits had enough power that they were in a position to pick and choose which scientists' work they would support and which they wouldn't. And in the case of those who fell in the latter category, like Tycho Brahe, he mysteriously died at, I think he was in his 50s, and he was in good health. There's a book I mentioned which makes the case that he may have been murdered by his associate Kepler because he
Uh,
didn't go along with the heliocentric theory. So the Jesuits basically were able to play these scientists just how they wanted, and they would support the ones that, upheld the right theory, and they essentially would do away with the ones that didn't. And because we had that sort of framework established, the next step was coming up with things like evolution, the Big Bang Theory, and all of that. They all go together.
yeah, I kind of had the same idea just recently. I realized, yeah, without heliocentrism, they couldn't have the billions of years necessary for evolution and all that kind of stuff, right? So
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
very good insight. Yeah. Why did the Catholics have such a problem with Martin Luther?
Well, like any big corporation, they were panicking due to a loss in market share. This guy, Luther, came along and quite arrogantly, according to the Catholics, basically said, we've gone way off course. We need to get back to the basics. And sola scriptura was Luther's call to get back to the basics. In other words, the Bible is the sole undisputed word of God, and everything else is extras, which may or may not be valid. So Luther called them out. He was, in fact, a Catholic priest.
Mhm.
And when he saw indulgences being given out, which were little pieces of paper that the Catholic Church gave to peasants, promising that their loved ones would be saved, and which were in fact used to finance the construction of the Vatican Cathedral. Luther was furious at this. That was probably the main thing that got him going. But he pointed out dozens of flaws that the Catholic Church was guilty of, and he nailed his list of theses to the church wall, and that was the start of the Reformation.
People started reading the Bible for themselves, right? He translated the Bible into German, and the Catholic Church kind of lost their monopoly on salvation, and the Pope was seen as the authority,
Mm-hmm.
right? You couldn't question the Pope. And then, so how did the Jesuits fit in then?
There was a guy called Don Inigo Lopez de Recalde. He was born in Spain in 1491. He was a soldier. He received a severe wound in the battlefield that left him with a permanent limp. Historians believe that he had a traumatic experience from this, which resulted in a nervous breakdown. And when he was recovering from his injury, he got interested in the Catholic faith. And apparently, he had these feverish dreams about Catholic doctrine. So, by whatever means, he was convinced that his goal in life was going to be to uphold Catholic doctrine at all costs. And he thus formed the Jesuit order, which he called the Society of Jesus, ironically, in 1534, when he was 44 years old. He had a few co-founders, and they sort of got going as a sort of private organization. But they eventually approached the Pope, and in 1540, the constitution of the order was approved by Pope Paul III in Rome. Now, when the Reformation went into full swing, the Pope wasted no time in leveraging this newly formed Jesuit order as a sort of counter-reformational force. And they did everything in their power to nip it in the bud. They weren't able to do that, so they did the next best thing, which was basically starting to wage a war of attrition, which has been going on now for 5 centuries. They do this through various means. They set up schools. You had already 500 years ago the beginnings of Jesuit education, which included colleges, universities, and we still see those today. They've expanded worldwide. And basically, they start when minds are young and fresh and impressionable, and they basically indoctrinate students into the sort of Jesuit mentality. If you could summarize the sort of one overriding goal of the Jesuits, it's to quench the flame of the Reformation.
Wow. So it's they're like the CIA of the Catholic Church or something, if we want to put it in,
Yeah,
because they're kind of like a military, but they also do a lot of intelligence and propaganda, right?
exactly. They're like
Yeah.
CIA in the US or MI6 in Britain. Same deal. Exactly. Private
Oh, really?
army. It's basically a worldwide indoctrination camp. And a
Wow.
lot of famous figures went to Jesuit colleges, several US presidents. I believe Winston Churchill, I mentioned in my book. So a lot of prominent politicians throughout modern history are Jesuit educated. The thing about the Jesuits is they're real masters of public relations.
Ah,
And if you look at pretty much any Hollywood portrayal of Jesuits, they're always the heroes. You've got this movie, The Mission,
yeah.
where, they're these heroic figures who were fighting to save the natives in South America from slavery. They're these iconic protagonists who do nothing but good. So that's the PR arm of the Jesuit order. They're the ones that are in public view, and
Mm,
that's how the public forms their
interesting.
opinions.
because they did a lot of missionary activity back then, in the
Yep.
16th, 17th century, especially in Asia. I've been to different countries where there's a lot of churches, Catholic churches named after Xavier, Francis
Hmm.
Xavier, right? And he went around Asia and started all these Catholic churches, and they're still standing, and they're like some of the oldest Catholic churches in Asia. So I've been to these places myself, and I didn't really understand. I didn't know he was a Jesuit and what that was all about. So yeah, so they had this missionary kind of activity, but like you said, that's just kind of the surface level. And thinking about a modern day Jesuit who we mentioned earlier, Fauci, you can almost see that surface level public relations expertise at work, right? Very smooth talker.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah,
Very smooth
that's right.
talker. Wow. So their mission was really to destroy Protestantism, right?
It was. And
Okay.
by extension, not only Protestantism, but basically to remove God from our universe, because they went beyond just destroying the Protestant church. They have been destroying science, they've been destroying education, language, everything. The whole sort of concept of wokeism you can trace back to the Jesuits.
Really?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
so are these things that they believe themselves, or are they just trying to corrupt everyone else? Like originally, were they kind of Catholics who believed in God? What do they actually believe?
Well,
I wonder.
to answer that, I think we need to circle back to Luther. One of the key pronouncements that he made was that the papacy is the Antichrist.
Yeah.
Now, he wasn't the first to say that. There were numerous reformers in the 15 and 1600s who all concurred with that theory. And if you start with that as your point of origin, that the papacy is in fact the Antichrist, then it all makes sense. And from some point several centuries ago, the papacy has been behind the scenes orchestrating all of this with the support of the Jesuit order. So, what I learned when I was writing this book, because it was a learning process for me too, what I learned is that this framework slowly coalesced into view as I was writing the book. And I started to see how everything fits together in the big picture. And if you take as your starting point that the papacy is the Antichrist and the Jesuits are upholding the Antichrist, then
Mm.
everything they do makes total sense. And that's why we have,
Wow.
this sort of satanic inversion in the form of feminism, in the form of, central bank digital currencies about to come out, the COVID scamdemic, all of these things that are happening, even the two world wars that we've been through, they're all part of this satanic sort of plot, which is not only counter Protestant, but I would say counter civilizational.
What is
I
their
think I
goal?
think they want to remold the world in the image that Satan wishes. So they have to tear down whatever is good, true, and beautiful and replace it with satanic inversion. That's how I see it.
Yeah. And the Pope put himself above the Roman emperor, even because he would crown
Hmm.
the emperors.
Yeah, and if you think the Pope is powerful, he is second fiddle to the Black Pope, which is the leader of the
Ah,
Jesuit order. We
yeah.
don't even know what the Black Pope is up to because he's in the shadows. That's why they call him the Black Pope. And from what I gather, the Pope that we all know and can see in the media reports to the Black Pope.
Like according to Luther and a lot of other people, every pope in that position is an antichrist. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not sure if that's true. I would say that there have been some good popes.
Okay.
And the Catholic Church also did not start out as a sort of purveyor of satanic inversion. I think probably for the first few hundred years, they were sort of a viable church.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think gradually over time, as they increased in power and their hold over Europe became a stranglehold, with the Inquisition and those types of movements, they sort of changed and they evolved into something very, very different. And there's also a question as to how much of the satanic inversion going on today is sort of sourced from the Jesuit order side versus from the Catholic Church side. And it could even be that the Black Pope has now taken the Catholic Church completely under his thumb
Mm.
and is pulling all of the strings. I don't know that for sure.
Okay, but generally, as far as you know, there's kind of always a black pope operating behind the scenes.
Starting with Don Inigo, who renamed himself Ignatius of Loyola.
Yeah.
That's his sort of official historic title. He
Wow.
was the
Okay.
first Black Pope.
Oh, so he was the black pope originally.
Yes, he was the
Okay.
first one. And I have seen the Black Pope of contemporary times occasionally mentioned in the media, but it's
Hmm.
always like one line, and you have no clue who the guy is, what his motivations are. You don't know anything about him. It's just like, this is the Black Pope, this is his name, and that's about it. It's like the whole thing is shrouded in secrecy.
Who, like, you mean in like mainstream media?
Yeah,
Or
yeah, I've
really?
seen this once or twice.
They actually say the word black pope.
I'm not sure if they use that exact term, but they
Uh,
refer to him in some manner or other.
do you have any idea who it is, or is that top
I don't
secret?
offhand. Well,
Yeah.
I think they want it to be top secret.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the sense you get is there's a lot of these public figures who we kind of know and we think these are the evil guys, but we have the sense that there's somebody behind the scenes who we don't even know who they are, right? Kind of pulling the
Yeah, and,
strings.
and the other interesting thing about this is that they're so good at keeping these things secret that they know how to use sort of sacrificial pawns to keep
Uh
that whole thing going. And two of those key sacrificial pawns are the Freemasons and the Illuminati.
oh, that's
Now,
right.
the
You also
Illuminati is a term that most people have heard, right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it comes up in movies, it comes up in books. Everybody talks about the Illuminati, and everyone knows about the Freemasons as well. But they are essentially sort of thrown out there to take the spotlight off whatever the Jesuit order is doing. And in the meantime, they're in full service of the Jesuit order's directives. They're the fall guy. They're taking the heat off the Jesuit order, basically.
Yeah, because we all know about the Freemasons. The Illuminati is a little bit more mysterious, skull and
Well,
bones,
this
that
is
kind of thing.
interesting too, because in my chapter on the Freemasons, I make the point that you've basically got a bi-level organization. So the masonry that everybody knows about are the sort of do-gooders that meet up every
Hmm.
week and figure out, ways to help out their local community or, build a new building or do something that is a sort of positive thing. And then you've got this whole different level, which is, the upper level of the organization, which is quite separate from that lower level. And whatever is going on in that upper level, it's totally hush hush. We don't know what they're doing. All we get to see is the activities of the lower level. So again, it's like the PR front for Freemasonry. It's
Yeah,
those do-gooders in the lower
yeah.
positions that are, working a community service and all of this great looking stuff.
It's more of a psychological war than anything. They're not running
Absolutely.
around like shooting people. You know what I mean? They're brainwashing people using our emotions, our mind, our intellect, everything. They're kind of implanting narratives into our brains and even worldviews, at a level that people find hard to even believe or understand. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the closest corollary I can think of is the CIA. I mean, the same way
Yeah.
that the CIA controls the media and, they approve the release of Hollywood films and they go and consult on the latest Tom Cruise movie.
Oh, wow.
The same thing is happening with the Jesuit order, except we don't hear about it as much.
I wonder, like, if the Jesuits are working with the CIA, or are they the same
Yes,
thing? I wonder. You know what I mean? Um,
there's a very close connection between the Jesuit order and the CIA. I don't know if you follow Jay Dyer,
I don't know who that is.
but he makes the point that the CIA, the Jesuits, and the Vatican are all closely related and they work together. And he also mentioned that a lot of people working for the CIA are graduates of Jesuit colleges.
Mm.
So it's sort of a big happy family, if you will.
Yeah, I would imagine that they would have to be working together because there are these powerful organizations that kind of use the same tactics. And if they were opposed to each other, they would end up fighting each other. You know what I mean? So,
That's right. And I mentioned in my book too that the CIA many decades ago sort of came to the realization that if they could control the Vatican, they would basically have control over a massive number of people worldwide,
mm.
who identify as Catholics.
Oh, yeah.
So they started developing this sort of relationship. I don't think it was like an attack or an aggressive sort of move on their part. I think it was more of a partnership forming, like an alliance, because they knew the power of religion and the power that it has in controlling what people think. So the CIA was very interested in that, and I think that's how it started.
I heard that even the word propaganda started out as a Catholic word, like the Catholics invented that word.
Oh, that's
But
interesting.
they're definitely masters of propaganda. So it's not a surprise that they could pull off something as as large as the recent psyop we all lived through a few years ago. They've had 500 years of practice, basically, of these kind of
Yeah.
things.
The other interesting thing about the CIA, while we're on the topic of the origin of words, is that the CIA actually coined the term conspiracy theory.
It was that during the JFK trials. Is that
Exactly.
okay? Yeah, yeah.
Because there was so much backlash against the Warren Commission and so many sort of disbelievers that could not accept the official narrative of what actually happened to JFK, that the CIA came up with this term conspiracy theory, basically to discredit any independent thought on the topic of that assassination specifically. Now, since then, like this was a whopping success for the CIA
Mm.
because we still have that term, right in our faces every single day.
Yeah,
Even now in 2024, all you hear about is conspiracy theories, right?
yeah.
Anybody who veers off the front page of the newspaper is a conspiracy theorist. Now, in my first book, I have an appendix which talks about this because that book was, you could say, equally politically incorrect as as my new one,
That was about
and
feminism, wasn't it?
it
Feminism or
was
something?
the feminism psyop. Yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
we'll have to
So
talk about that one someday. Yeah.
I would love to. The thing about conspiracy theory is that when you think about it, as soon as you say the word, you're picturing some clown in a tinfoil hat, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So you can't even bring up the word without people having this image in their heads of something they're not supposed to believe or take seriously.
yeah, yeah. People feel safe with the accepted narrative, right?
They
And
do.
it's all
Yeah.
about I think the essence of these psyops, what makes them work really is people's fear of being ostracized. I think that's
Hmm.
ranks very high in the reasons why these things work. And
That's right.
people's fear of being ostracized. That's
Yeah, it's
like,
a shaming tactic.
yeah, nobody
Yeah.
wants to get kicked out of society, so they go along with the narrative.
Now, when you think about it, conspiracies are something that happen every day. A conspiracy is nothing more than two or more parties agreeing on an agenda and then carrying it out. But
That
when you
happens
put the
every
word
day.
theory,
Yeah,
it does. But when you put the word theory behind it, you're basically making the case that, well, it's not actually factually correct. It's only a theory.
yeah,
And if you look at these so-called conspiracy theories throughout history, most of them have been subsequently proven. I mean, look at what happened
yeah,
in Vietnam. The Gulf of
yeah,
Tonkin incident turned out to
yeah,
be a total scam. It never happened.
yeah.
And that was the excuse that the US used to enter the Vietnam War.
And a lot of the theories coming out of the science, science, the official science, they're theories that have not been proven, but
That's
everyone
right.
everyone thinks they're facts.
Yeah,
We're
like that little medical show we had a couple of years ago is a good example.
yeah. Well, let me ask you this: what about the how should I say it? The tribe of Judah. How does that fit into all of this? Or the people who claim to be from that tribe, the small hats.
Hmm. Right,
What's
right.
the relationship with them and the Jesuits? Did you come across anything in your research about that? You did mention a few things in your book.
I
Um,
did, yeah.
what-
Well, that goes back to a guy called Francisco Ribera, who was a Jesuit priest, and he basically reinterpreted scripture to include a future Antichrist, which is in
that's
direct
right.
contrast to Luther's assertion that the
Yeah,
papacy is the Antichrist. And the
yeah.
reason he did this was obviously to take the spotlight off the papacy and deny the charge that Luther made against it. Now, once you had this future Antichrist theory, another guy came along called John Nelson Darby, who
Yeah.
popularized this and turned it into something called the dispensationalist
Uh,
movement.
yeah.
And this also gave us some nonsense called the pre-tribulation rapture,
Oh, yes.
which is this weird sort of
Oh,
dual second coming where Christ doesn't come once in the second coming, but rather twice. He
yeah.
comes first before the tribulation starts to rescue everyone who's saved. And then he comes a second time at the end of the tribulation to, finish everything off. This is completely unbiblical.
And then guess who rules the world after the pre-trib rapture?
Right, right.
The small hats,
Yeah,
right? Zionism.
yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Zionism, the Christian Zionism, man. This, I have to contain myself because this, for some reason, I guess I don't know why, but the pre-trib rapture and this dispensationalism, I get really upset because I come
Well,
across so many
nobody can
people.
blame you.
I come
Yeah,
across
yeah.
so many people who believe in this stuff, and it just drives me crazy. It really does.
Yeah, so we can thank this clown called Cyrus Schofield, who was a
Yeah.
disgraced lawyer who wrote something called the Schofield Reference Bible. And he did this under the wing of a lawyer called Samuel Untermeyer, who basically was pulling the strings all along and made sure that the Schofield Reference Bible became the sort of accepted version of Scripture,
Ah,
replacing the King James version, which is the one and true, Word of God. And it was through this Schofield Reference Bible, which contained copious footnotes
yeah.
explaining everything in the wrong way, of course.
Yeah. So you got his
Um,
interpretation of scripture.
right. And one of those
Uh,
interpretations was that the modern state of Israel is equivalent to the Israel of the Old Testament. And it's
uh,
therefore a divinely sanctioned state that must be upheld and defended at all
oh,
costs if you're a good Christian. So this
yeah.
whole nonsense started with the Schofield Reference Bible. And what made it so insidious is that it was placed in all of the Bible colleges pretty
Yeah.
much throughout the US and
Yeah.
probably other Western countries as well. And that's where the whole thing started, because any pastor graduating from one of those
Mm.
colleges
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
had this view of dispensationalist source Zionism that they spread out to their congregation.
It's a similar tactics as the Jesuits by starting universities, right? They would start
Yeah,
seminaries and push this idea. I think Dallas Theological Seminary is one of them.
it was. Yeah,
I met a guy who graduated from there about a year and a half ago, and he was telling me about because whenever there's a conflict in Israel, they start freaking out, right? So I
right.
just kind of casually mentioned. He said, "Oh, the rapture's coming." I said, "Well, I was being very polite. I was like, well, that's one view. That's one view. There are many different views of eschatology, and that's one
Yeah,
view. I happen to not agree. I happen to have a different view." I said it as
right.
politely as possible. Then the guy
Hmm.
just started yelling and screaming at me. They really love the pre-trib rapture. They love it. They think that's part of the Christian faith. And it's almost like an idol. Like they believe we're saved from the rapture. We're saved from tribulation. That's what they think. We're saved from the
Well,
wrath of God, right?
it's very clever because it makes being a Christian very easy. It
And
means you don't
easily
have to go
deceived.
through any hardship, that you're
But
going
we
to get a
do.
free pass out of the
Yeah.
tribulation before it even starts. So
Yeah.
everybody loves that idea. I mean, who doesn't want to escape this massive calamity called the tribulation, where basically everything is going to go downhill pretty quick? Who doesn't want to escape that? So it's very clever
Yeah.
and very seductive. But if you think about Christianity for the last 2,000 years, look at what has happened to some of the greatest Christians, starting with the apostles, going through the Reformation.
They
I
get
mean, during
killed.
the Reformation, yeah, they got burned at the stake
Yeah.
because they dared to read the Bible by themselves without the help of a priest.
Was it one of the first, was it Tyndale or one of these guys? There were like a few translations before the KJV, and a lot of those guys were killed for
They
translating the
were.
Bible.
Yeah, they were
Yeah.
burned at the stake.
Yeah.
So the whole history of Christianity, if you understand what it means to be a Christian, part of that is being willing to suffer for your faith. And
Exactly.
as difficult as that may be, it is part and parcel of being a Christian. There's no free pass for Christians. God
Yeah.
expects us to do our part. He expects us to fight for our faith. And you
Yeah.
can't get around it. And the whole nonsense of a pre-trib rapture totally goes against that entire concept.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, like every day, there's friction between a believer and a non-believer, right? Between a Christian and this world, this evil age that we live in, and there's been basically 2,000 years of tribulation
Yeah, and there's
already,
going to
you
be
know?
more. I mean, you look at
So,
CBDC. I keep thinking about the mark of the beast and how that's going to play out when Christians are no longer able to use their bank account,
oh yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. Christians, that's the thing is that the if you believe in a pre-trib rapture, then you're not even concerned with anything because you think it's impossible for you to be deceived. But yet
Hmm.
they are some of the most deceived Christians out there.
They are. Yeah.
Which is sad. But, it does say there'll be an apostasy. So I just wonder maybe all these kind of fake church. Then you got the Pentecostals and all this stuff. Don't even get me started. But
I mentioned them in my book.
you do, yeah.
They're a very interesting bunch.
I've experienced some of this firsthand. Whoa.
Oh, is that right?
Oh yeah, kind of accidentally. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
but it was great. I got firsthand knowledge of what they do and what they believe, and I experienced it. I went undercover, basically, more or less, without really knowing it. But that's a maybe another conversation we can have sometime. But
Oh,
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
interesting.
I witnessed these guys up front, even with an open mind, and I investigated it thoroughly, and I think it might be a kind of Gnosticism, actually. I
It's
don't
quite
even I
possible.
don't even
Yeah.
know. I mean, I want to be nice and say, yeah, they're Christians, but they're just, they're a bit off with their theology. Their heart's in the right place. Maybe if I was in a good mood, I would say something like that. But I might even say they're just not even Christian and they're just total heretics. I don't know.
So I cover part of this in my New Age chapter, where I talk about the influence of the New Age movement on the
Oh,
Protestant
yes.
church.
New Age.
And then
That's what it
what
is.
what you've got now is you've got these sort of weird hybrid churches, which includes the guys you're talking about, but many other churches as well. And they basically are really good marketers because what they do is they
Ah,
take Christian concepts and they combine them with all kinds of weird New Age stuff, like healing crystals and
yeah.
autotheism and the idea that we can all become gods and all of this
Yeah,
New Age
totally.
baffle gab. And
Yeah.
it's very seductive because you think, oh well, if I join this church, I'm going to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that by joining this church, they're basically losing sight of what Christianity really is, because the New Age movement has its roots in Gnosticism and
Mm,
in Satanism. It goes way
yeah.
back over 100 years. Blavatsky is
Oh,
one of the key figures. She was a prominent Satanist,
yeah.
and she started this movement called Theosophy.
Yep.
And basically, it's an anti-Christian movement
Mm,
where they're preaching all kinds of stuff that has some of its roots are from Eastern spirituality. You've got Buddhist elements,
mm.
you've got satanic elements, but
Hindu, a
it's
lot of Hindu stuff.
essentially Hindu stuff as
Yeah.
well, but it's anti-Christian.
For sure. And there's a connection with Crowley and these guys that kind of continued on.
Yeah. He's in
And
my book as well, and he is one of the leading sort of satanic clowns of the 20th century who helped popularize all of this stuff.
yeah, I mean that's part of the infiltration. And like Luther's Reformation. I mean, what would Luther think of what's going on now? You know what I mean? And
Oh, he would have some choice words for them.
oh, and these Pentecostals and charismatics, they're the fastest growing type of Christianity in the world, and there's like over 600
Yeah.
million of them. They're
Yeah,
second
because
only
it's
to
so
Catholics.
seductive.
Oh yeah,
Everybody wants to see miracles,
well,
right?
and it's fun. They got the music and they're happy and they're, all this
Yeah,
stuff going on, and they're just kind of having fun. They're having a good old time. And
they
then,
are. And a lot of them have these sort of these subsidiaries of what they call Christian music,
oh
where they're
yeah,
making a ton of money off selling so-called Christian songs and Christian labels and whatever. And
yeah.
it's not really Christian.
Yeah, it's just all emotionalism, even hypnotism, a lot of hypnotism, and
Hmm.
people claiming to be apostles and prophets and claiming to be Jesus. You name it, man. They're claiming crazy stuff for sure, and
They
people just
are, yeah,
believe it. And like you were talking about the Schofield Bible and all this, it's basically propaganda 101. It wasn't just some
absolutely.
random accident. You know what I mean? It was a
No, it
plan.
was
It
orchestrated
was orchestrated.
all the
Yeah.
way,
Yeah, to
all the
corrupt
way.
the church from within,
Exactly.
right? So a
Yeah.
lot of times, like in the past, I used to think the threat to Christianity was from without. But it seems
Hmm.
more after, especially after some things I've experienced in the last couple of years, the real urgent threat might be more from within, you
It
know?
absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of case studies where I talk about the Anglican Church, the Presbyterians, and the Seventh-day Adventists. And nothing against those denominations. I just picked them as examples of how the Jesuits sort of wormed their way in and basically destroyed it from within, exactly the way you're talking about.
Wow. And you get these charismatic pastors. They're really good storytellers, they're good speakers. Once in a while they get there's a scandal like we had last week. Biggest church in America. You see that? The pastor was this pedophile. So
Oh, all the time. It's
yeah, well,
happening all
yeah,
the time.
they're not even real Christians, in my opinion. A lot of them, you
I
know.
agree.
Maybe they started out with good intentions or something, but at some point they got corrupted.
Yeah, like Billy Graham. I mean, for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes, he probably started out as a sincere Christian who wanted to spread the word of God. But then along the way, he got co-opted into doing all kinds of stuff that he didn't sign up for.
And he was like the face of Christianity for a long time,
He
you know?
was, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And saying all kinds of crazy stuff too. But yet Christians they always have a good impression of good old Billy Graham. Kind of more of a liberal, I think, or at least he became that way. And the fundamentalists even disowned him. But then fundamentalism itself kind of took on a bad name, right? The people who denied the new, latest, and greatest scientific discoveries, the scientific narratives coming out of the Royal Society, by the way. And yeah, they
Hmm.
were all a bunch of Freemasons and their families and all that stuff. But if you deny these scientific narratives that deliberately go contrary to what the Bible says about creation, then they were labeled fundamentalists. It's almost kind of like being labeled as a conspiracy theorist or something. And this
It's
is,
just as bad. Yeah.
yeah, and this is
Yeah.
kind of very relevant to us today because a lot of people talking about cosmology again. But I just kind of wonder, like, why did Christians reject Darwinism, evolution, but they embraced heliocentrism? You know what I mean? That is kind of
Well,
curious to me. Um,
it sort of went back and forth. Like the Catholic Church was not on board with heliocentrism from the get-go. So when Copernicus first surfaced and started popularizing his theory, he didn't actually state that this was fact. He said that it was
yeah,
a theory that he came up with, and he was most likely inspired by, ancient civilizations that believed in sun gods and that the sun was the center of the universe.
yeah,
The Catholic Church for several hundred years did not go along with the heliocentrist view, but later they sort of did an about face and they decided this is where we're going. And they embraced heliocentrism and they even sort of made up with Galileo after basically charging him with heresy. Because Galileo built on the heliocentric model that
Yeah.
Copernicus originated. And he was very, very aggressive about it. He approached the church, the Catholic Church, with his model, and he sort of insisted that the church come around and accept this viewpoint. Not only did they resist, but they actually imprisoned him for a while, and he got into all kinds of trouble. But later, he was absolved of those charges, and the Catholic Church embraced the heliocentric model in conjunction with the Jesuit work that was going on behind the scenes in controlling the scientific community. It
Yeah.
raises an interesting question, which is, did the Jesuits actually instruct the Catholic Church to change their mind
It
about the whole
sounds like
thing?
somebody did. Yeah. It sounds
Yeah.
like it. They're changing the narrative from the top down. And then the people, I
Mhm.
guess the people just follow along, I suppose. They're not really deciding for themselves or thinking for themselves, you know what I mean? The average person is being told what to believe without evidence, right?
Mhm.
Without testing it out. And then they put the globes in the classrooms like in the late 1800s.
Right.
And that then it was all over. Then
It
then
was,
then
yeah.
it was imprinted on children's brains. This is because that's really one of the hardest deceptions to try to wake people up from. It's almost impossible, I've found. Now, people are waking up to this, but I found it difficult to talk to people about this. I only know one person in real life who has a similar cosmology that I do, which is based on the
Right.
Bible. And it is
Yeah.
very biblically based, you know, and a lot of Christians are speaking out against biblical cosmology because I guess they're just deceived, you know what I mean? But there's a really violent reaction against this, against even just looking into it, questioning
So it's
narrative.
basically it's about ego,
Ah,
because your view of the universe is intimately tied up in your ego and the way that you see yourself. So when you have to question something that you've believed your entire life, your first reaction is to violently reject it,
hmm,
right?
yeah,
You know, if you believe that we live on a spinning ball for 50 years, you can't suddenly just snap your fingers and say, okay, it's not a spinning ball anymore. It's I'm going to go with the geocentric model now. You sort of have to come around gradually. You have to
yeah,
do your own research. And what people don't realize is that when we were in grade school or kindergarten or whatever it was, we didn't get a bunch of compasses and telescopes and go outside and do your own research and come back and tell the teacher, well, is it geocentric or heliocentric? We didn't have
yeah,
these little research projects where we got to decide for ourselves. We were
no,
just told. We
yeah,
walked in the room, there's this little blue ball in the corner of every classroom,
yeah.
and it was just automatic acceptance. And if people can just realize that they did not do their own research and they owe it to themselves to take that extra step and research it for themselves, then they're on the right path to figuring out which model to accept.
Yeah, and I remember being told that, you know, the people in the ancient world, they used to believe it was flat and they thought Columbus would fall off the edge. So they kind of give you a straw man argument. They give you a fake flat earth model, first of all, and say, yeah, this
Mm,
is what people used to believe. They were kind of dumb back then. And then you kind of laugh at them. But now we have all this science and now we know the truth. It turns
mm,
out the Bible was wrong and you know what I mean? So,
mm.
and then you got the Christians trying to scramble how to believe both, right? How to believe heliocentrism and sometimes try how to believe evolution and believe the Bible at the same time. They have some very creative interpretations of that, but ultimately I think they're all flawed. And
Yeah.
none of them prove that the earth is a spinning ball. That's just taking it for granted that it is, right?
Well, see, the
So,
thing about the King James Bible is because it's written in Old English, it's very, very easy to twist the meaning any way you want. You
ah,
can make arguments for a plain Earth and you can make arguments for a globe Earth. In my book, I reference a couple of passages from Scripture where it makes it pretty obvious that it's not a spinning ball. But there will be
yeah.
somebody out there who will take that same passage and use it as evidence that we live on a spinning ball. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's that one in Isaiah, I believe the earth is a circle, right? The circle of the
Right, but is
earth,
it a
right?
circle or a globe? Does a circle imply a sphere? Does a sphere imply a circle? I mean, you can go all day
Well,
on this stuff.
yeah, I have videos I'll put up later that I'm still working on, but I came across one Bible scholar looking at the Hebrew, and he said it is impossible that verse is talking about a sphere based on the grammar and the language.
Hmm.
It's impossible that that is talking about a spinning ball. And these are
Right.
people who believe there are some scholars out there who stand up for the biblical text even
Hmm.
though they probably don't believe the cosmology that it really implies. But they say, yeah, the Bible does actually say this. The diagrams that people make of the biblical cosmology, right? And they'll admit, they'll be like, yeah, that's what the Bible says, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of Christians today will not even say that much. But yeah, yeah, any well-informed scholar and honest scholar will admit that the Bible gives us this kind of cosmology, something like this, and I'll put the image up there. But then they'll try to explain it away, like, well, that's just what people believed back then, or
Well, there's a really
yeah,
simple proof, which I mentioned, which basically it categorically refutes the heliocentric model. And you can do this experiment yourself. All you have to do is go outside at night, preferably in the country where you can see the stars, and look at the star map, and then go back again next week or even the next night and look at it again. And you're going to see an identical star map. Now, if we were on a ball that is constantly spinning, that is going around the sun in a solar system which is shooting through space at some astronomical speed, we would have a different star map every single night. It would be
yeah,
physically impossible to have the same star map 2 nights in a row.
and it's been the same for thousands of years.
It has
The Big
no
Dipper.
change whatsoever.
We wouldn't have the Big Dipper every night, basically, is what you're saying. Or these
That's right.
constellations, right? The constellations would change
They
on a
would
regular
constantly
basis.
change.
Yeah, and these are just common sense arguments, you know what I mean? And the heliocentrists never, yeah, like you said before, Copernicus, he was even hesitant to publish. In fact, it was his apprentice who published his book. He didn't want to
Mhm.
publish his book because he didn't think he had proved anything. He thought people would just laugh at him,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
get the feeling that Copernicus was probably the most innocent one of the bunch because he was a religious man. He was a
Okay.
Catholic. Some people believe he may have been ordained, but he was at the very least a clerical figure in the church. And I think that this was one of those cases where the Jesuits decided to leverage his findings or his theories because it suited their purpose. And I don't think that Copernicus was sort of in on it. He was a useful idiot,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, and he may have. I think around that time, people were kind of rediscovering the ancient Greek philosophers like Pythagoras and these guys, Plato, and so
Hmm.
he may have come across some of these ancient writings and been like, "Oh, that's kind of an interesting concept. Let me check into it." So, and
Exactly.
he had a lot of math. It was mainly, mathematical formulas that probably work just as well on a geocentric model as they do a heliocentric model anyway. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and another thing about these scientists back in the 15th and 16th centuries is a lot of them were not the same as what we think of a scientist being today. You have
Yeah,
people who dabbled in all kinds of fields. They were like, the Renaissance man, which does a bit of this and a bit of that. Like
yeah,
Newton, for example, was into all kinds of weird stuff that had nothing to do with hard science. The same
yeah,
goes for a lot of these earlier figures. Some of them were lawyers, some of them were priests, some of them were in various different fields. But the point is, they were not full-time scientists. And this made
yeah,
them susceptible to coming up with theories that don't necessarily hold true to the scientific method. They didn't have any kind of
yeah,
rigorous model where they would test their theory and they would reject the null hypothesis and all of this stuff that
yeah,
you learned in
yeah,
high school chemistry. They didn't do any of
yeah,
that. They basically got this idea, like you said, Copernicus thought, hey, this looks cool. I'm going to look into it.
Yeah.
And that's how it all got started. It's basically an attack on sola scriptura.
Yeah,
No,
exactly. Exactly. A lot of these, I think, are an attack on the five solas, probably somehow, right?
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have this anecdote where I talk about this weekend that I spent as a teenager at Lutheran camp. And the pastor was basically talking about fundamentalists with this really, really condescending tone,
Yeah. Yeah.
like they're a bunch of total simpletons,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
we need to understand that, the Bible was written a long time ago, and
Yeah.
we're a
Oh,
lot
yeah.
smarter now,
Yeah.
as if 50 years of modern social theory can somehow trump the Word of God. It's
Well,
bizarre.
I grew up as a Lutheran, and I found them to be very liberal, even back then when I wasn't even a real believer necessarily, but they would try to deny the miracles in the Bible and all kinds
Hmm.
of crazy stuff, So yeah, so the Lutheran Church, at least one faction of it, at least, became very liberal at some point. And it was about 100 years ago they had this trial. I think it was Tennessee. It was illegal to preach evolution or to teach evolution in public schools, but some guy did that, and he went.
Hmm.
They put him on trial for teaching evolution. It was illegal in Tennessee, and during
Oh,
that
wasn't
trial,
there a movie about that?
maybe, yeah, it was about 100 years ago, and then, but
Yeah.
and he was convicted of he was guilty, but it was a massive PR event nationwide, and what they did was just make fundamentalists look really stupid. Like that was the whole purpose of it.
Yeah. And
So
they've been doing it ever since. I mean, there's several Hollywood movies where you'll always have this low IQ so-called fundamentalist
yeah.
whose every second word out of their mouths is Jesus Christ. And they're just made to look completely insane, basically.
Yeah, I was almost thinking of coming up with a new term, like I don't know if it's been done. It probably has been done, like a neo-fundamentalist. I don't
I
know.
struggled with that when I was writing the book, and I did not want to use the word fundamentalist to describe someone who believes in sola scriptura. And I
Yeah.
found that if you simply use words like reading the Bible naturalistically,
Ah,
because if you say literally, then again, you think of, a simpleton, like don't take everything literally,
yeah.
right? If you use terms like naturalistic reading of the Bible, that's a good start. And
Yeah.
it's the same as, like we said earlier, do not use the term conspiracy theory because no one's going to
Yeah.
take you seriously as soon as you say that word. It's the same with
Yeah.
fundamentalist.
Yeah, it has a negative connotation. But you do talk about that in your book as well. There's different genres in the Bible. You
Right.
mentioned like I think it was
Yeah.
6 or 8 main ones, and include like there's a historical narrative, which in my
Hmm.
research starts in Genesis 1, right?
Genesis is a historical book.
It
That's
is,
right.
right? It talks
It
about
is.
genealogy,
Yeah.
right? This guy begat
Yeah.
that guy. It's all and then Adam and Eve are always seen as historical, real people throughout the Bible. Paul
Yeah.
talks
Yeah.
about them as if they're real people,
That's
right?
right.
So we've gotten to the point people don't even believe Adam and Eve were even real people, right?
Yeah.
Most people
No,
in the
it's
world probably don't believe that.
well, it's very trendy right now to call the entire Bible symbolic
Oh yeah, the Masons do that. And
all the time.
yeah. Yeah, so if Genesis 1 is historical narrative, then you kind of read it differently than if you think it's allegory or mythology, right? And but there are,
It's a game changer.
yeah, yeah, but there are things like prophecy is kind of like a dream in a way, right? Because there's dreams, even in Genesis, like Joseph's having these dreams. You can't read those literally or literalistically. These are
Hmm.
symbolic dreams, and prophecy often would come to people in a dream, and they're very
Yeah.
symbolic, right? Prophecy must be read differently than, but a lot of people will read prophecy as historical narrative. But talking about the future, they come up with a totally different eschatology than if you read it as prophecy, as symbolic and maybe fulfilled in, certain way in a greater way maybe than what it says. That's called sensus plenior.
The
So
other interesting thing about modern day Lutheran churches is that I've noticed a lot of the pastors shy away from the book of Revelation.
yeah, they don't know what to make of it, I guess.
It's like they're scared to read it or they're scared to comment on, what is going on here.
Well, I think a
And
lot
it's
of
such a cop out.
yeah. Well, I think a lot of dispensationalists thought that they took this nation of Israel and then they had like what was it like 70 years or something, right? So they all thought the world would end about 10 years ago.
Oh,
You
they're
know,
talking about the 70 weeks of Daniel.
yeah, yeah, 70 weeks of Daniel, then the establishment of
Yeah.
Israel and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
it's like, no,
And
yeah, yeah, just
no,
total
that's a
nonsense.
total scam. Yeah.
Total, it is, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, so many people believe that, and
Yeah.
they don't want to question it because they don't want to get kicked out of their Bible study
Mhm.
or whatever. You know what I mean?
I've heard pastors who they just basically say, well, don't think too much about Revelation. It's not important.
Yeah, which kind of means that
To
probably
me,
is
it's the
important.
most important book in the whole
Yeah,
in the whole New
yeah,
Testament because
it
I want to
probably
know
is.
what's coming.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm still, but I think it's really about the last 2,000 years, to be honest.
Well, a lot of
You
it
know?
is.
Yeah,
A lot
yeah,
of it we've already lived through. It's
yeah,
not all in the
yeah.
future.
Yeah, it's kind of talking about the nature of reality. It's not so much like this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And most of Christianity were what we now call all millennial in the
Mm,
reformers as well. They didn't really call it that back then, but they saw this age like Jesus fulfilled Old Testament prophecy, right?
mm,
Inaugurated the new covenant, and he's reigning in heaven right now. So we're in the reign, and that will
mhm.
then he returns at the end of this age, and then new heavens, new earth, new spiritual body.
I was just thinking the other day, how is this going to look? You get the feeling that the heavens and the earth are going to be completely retooled and redesigned into something that we can't even imagine. We're going to have new bodies. We're going to have this completely new reality, which encompasses heaven and earth. And for us to try to grasp what it's going to look like is probably not possible
Mm,
from our limited reference point that we have here today. That's my
yeah,
conclusion because I'm having great difficulty trying to figure out
yeah,
how
yeah.
this whole thing is going to look. And I don't think we were meant to know.
Well, Paul says we'll have bodies like Jesus, right? Resurrected bodies,
Right.
a
Yeah, and
spiritual.
free of
Spiritual.
pain and
Yeah,
free of
yeah. We
suffering.
have a natural body now, a physical body.
Right.
It will be a spiritual
Yeah.
body, whatever that means. We don't know what that means, but it's going to be different. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think everything will be a lot different. And so, but we're, even though, even a born again Christian still has the same old physical body that they had before,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And that's kind of the problem, so I don't expect any kind of perfection in this life, although we do make improvement in, the sanctification, right? Process of sanctification. But a lot of these
mhm.
new age churches are preaching glorification in this life, which is perfection and the ability to do signs and wonders, miracles, right? In this life. Dude, I met three people in the last year who claimed to be apostles whose goal is to their goal no, it gets weirder. Their goal is to raise people from the dead, literally.
Oh, wow. Well, good luck.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, that's what we're dealing with here. That's what we're dealing with. These are people I actually
Oh,
met in real life.
it's scary.
Yeah. So, but that I've never met these kind of people before. So it's like it inspired me to crack open the Bible and look into this deeply. Like, what is an
Hmm.
apostle? What is a prophet?
Yeah,
And it's like, oh, what is speaking in tongues? Foreign language,
right.
right? So it really got me studying a lot, and I learned a lot, and I think I kind of understand it. Although people are still going to debate these issues, and really at the end of the day, they're going to believe what they want to believe, regardless of what the
Well,
Bible
I,
really
I think
says.
that the Bible was intentionally made very, very opaque because I think that God wants us to really work at understanding
Mm,
His Word.
yeah.
He made it that way on purpose because I think part of our duty as Christians is to really try to understand the Bible. I'm having a heck of a time with some of the books, especially Revelation,
Yeah.
but I just try to read it and reread it, and I'll put up an audio Bible on YouTube and listen instead of read, and I'll try every way I can to sort of improve my understanding. But I don't think that anybody will ever come to the point where we're
Yeah.
all going to agree on exactly what it all
Probably.
means,
Yeah.
right?
Well, we're actually out of time. That's a good way to end it, actually, even though we could go on more, but I'll let you I'll give you a break now. But thanks a lot for coming on.
My pleasure.
Really, really interesting. We can do this again sometime if you
That
want.
would be great.